In the words of the famous philosopher, Buju Banton, circumstances made me what I am. Free Buju. The Right Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Timothy Harris, His Excellency, the Governor General, Sir Tapley Seaton, the Right Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Sean Richards, the Right Honorable Premier of Nevis, Mr. Mark Brantley, other honorable and esteemed guests. It's an honor for me to be the featured speaker for this evening. I will provide a narrative of my professional development with historical references to this evening's theme. Our country's success rests not on its size, but on our nation's ability to rise to the occasion. I was born in 1974 as Andy Smith. My mother dropped out of high school at a young age after giving birth to me. And my biological father was noticeably absent as I grew up in Atlas Village with my grandmother and 3 uncles. My family struggled with literacy, but my mother, she has always been an avid reader, and she continues to read up until this day. And although she doesn't always know how to pronounce the words right, she always knows exactly what the words mean. Back then, life was simple in Atlas Village. My grandmother worked at the Lodge Estate. We lived in wooden houses, and breakfast consisted mostly of bush tea and bread and cheese. Most times, the food was not enough. On Sundays, when my grandmother caught her hand, we ate saltfish and bread with milk tea, Milo or Ovaltine. Yummy. There was no running water, no electricity, and no flush toilets. We slept on lodging, and we had to hang them out daily, especially if they got rank. Without television, I had multiple occasions to hear my grandmother speak about Sukuna, as well as tales of the sunken ferry, Christina. By the time I was 6, I was running around Atlas Village barefooted, and the villagers endearingly called me Dr. Smith. My mother worked in the apparel industry, like many other parents at that time. Then she left to work on sailboats like Polynesia Windjammer. I missed her, particularly when life got hard or when my grandmother got drunk. If I did something wrong or left the yard without doing my chores, she would curse me and insult me and my mother. I was small and skinny, and my big ears didn't help. She used to call me rat butt ear. Come back to the yard. But I was always happy to see my mother return from the boat. She brought back boxes of food and clothes. I could have always counted on her to get me the things I wanted for school, like books and pencils. In 1983, I was 9 years old, attending the Keon Primary School when St. Kitts and Nevis became independent. I heard on the radio and from my friends that the celebration was spectacular, with music and fireworks and fanfare. Princess Margaret had visited the island, and there were massive man-of-war ships in the harbor. Unfortunately, my grandmother could not afford to send me to town, so I did not see our wonderful nation rise from the shackles of imperialism. Nonetheless, this was the birth of the smallest nation in the Western Hemisphere. We got a new flag, we got a new identity, and we got a new national anthem. We rose to the occasion, and folks, we will rise. Keon Primary School was difficult for me, and my head was just not in the game. Conditions were not conducive for learning. I had to walk a mile each way daily, barefooted, on the sun-scorched road. I was bullied by my friends and enemies alike. and I did not excel in any sports. No one seemed coquette. School was dull and boring, so many times I resorted to bird hunting and exploring the mountains instead. On sports day, they still forced me to run. My house never won. That said, the highlight of my primary school days was the introduction of the school meals program. Free food. This made school a whole lot more bearable. And by the end of my primary school days, my grades had improved, and on graduation day I was very optimistic until I learned that the student who was voted most likely to succeed was not me. Unfortunately, my grandmother eventually succumbed to knee arthritis, and she became sedentary. Thankfully, doctors made house visits back then, and I used to watch Dr. Jacobs attend to her bedside, prescribe medications, and aspirate fluid from her swollen knee. Sometimes that alleviated the pain. Other times, she resorted to alternative medicine like putting leaves on her knee or wearing copper bracelets in the hope of getting some relief. Her symptoms progressed. I was helpless, but I was motivated to learn medicine. When I got to the Keon High School, by the grace of God, I landed in 1A2. But the first year was similar to the last: poor attendance, poor discipline, and mediocre grades. During my second year of high school, I encountered teachers like Mrs. Patrice Mills, who must have noticed some potential. She sat me down and encouraged me to study my lessons and work harder. By now, my mother had quit her job on the boat and she moved to St. Martin. She sent us food and supplies when she could. And one of my uncles, Uncle Tony, who's here with us this evening, he paid for my books and lunch, and he began to take more of an interest in my education. When mark sheet came out and I failed, I got 2 sets of flogging, one at school and one at home. Yet he offered me prizes if I improved my grades. So as you can imagine, I didn't want any more licks, and I wanted whatever prizes he had to offer. So I rose to the challenge. As I advanced through school, I kept setting personal goals, and I spent several hours reading at night to the lamplight. I often sought the help of students ahead of me, such as Cromwell Williams, who eventually became a civil engineer, and Christopher Archibald, who became a priest. As for me, I became a hermit, a recluse, or even worse, a nerd. But I was determined that if education was the key to success, I wanted that key. Moreover, I had to break the cycle of abuse, hunger, and poverty. Despite my academic improvements, I began to enjoy a long-distance running in high school, and I regularly won medals at the annual steeplechase. In 1989, I was in 3rd form, and admittedly, my family's quality of life was turning around. We had electricity and running water, decent clothes, and beds. I was able to focus better and more clearly. After school, I used to cut sugarcane to bring in extra money. Then smash! Our whole life was shattered by Hurricane Hugo in September. The gushing winds of this Category 4 hurricane demolished thousands of houses and left countless people homeless and helpless. There was no clean running water or electricity for weeks. However, the people of this great nation came together and rebuilt this island. We rose to the occasion, and we will rise. Over the next couple of years, through stiff competition and significant sacrifices, I advanced to the top of my high school class to graduate with distinctions in many subjects except English. The summer of 1991, I sought employment at the only major research institution on the island, the St. Kitts Biomedical Research Foundation. That was truly an eye-opener for me. I was able to see real science at work for the first time. I worked alongside Gene Redmond and other prominent researchers, including a Nobel laureate. I was introduced to computers and floppy disks, and soon realized that typing was just not for girls. So I quickly recruited a friend to teach me typing. Remember, at this time, there were no internet and no Facebook. I was fascinated with working at the St. Kitts Biomedical Research Foundation, especially working with monkeys and medications. While at the St. Kitts Biomedical, I also met my future wife. I just didn't know it. Caitlin, who's here with us this evening. She truly enriches my life. She is the lemongrass in my bush tea. After a brief stint at the St. Kitts Biomedical, I started studies at the sixth form. Overly ambitious, I took on an excessive workload in math and science, and my grades suffered. The University of the West Indies had issued a scholastic test to determine who might qualify for scholarships. I took it, and I failed miserably. My prime competitor, Gavin Hamilton, however, passed with high grades and went on to college to after becoming the state scholar. As second runner-up state scholar, I was demoralized, but not discouraged. I returned to the St. Kitts Biomedical, the proud owner of a Scantel scholarship for 6,000 EC dollars. Just for the younger folks, Scantel preceded the cable and wireless.
That's right. Flow.
And now Flow, agreed. St. Kitts Biomedical was indeed a bastion of knowledge, science, and high-end technology. All the things that I believed in. I studied animal behavior and read protocols and managed sick animals. I even got excited about giving animals antibiotics late at night. That is where I learned about germ theory, sterility, and surgery. My interactions with visiting American students and scientists inspired me to do more and learn more. I advanced quickly and took on more and more responsibility. Impressed with my work ethic and conscientiousness, Gene Redmond inquired about my plans for college, but I had none. One of his philanthropists from Texas had visited the island and later sent me a study guide for the SAT. So I studied it and I took the SATs. Despite my lack of general knowledge and despite my limited exposure to worldly things such as Brussels sprouts, I scored above average. And Gene took a chance and offered me a scholarship to go to college. I applied to the only college that had open applications at that time, the Southern Connecticut State University, SCSU, and I was accepted. I excelled academically at the SCSU, and I made it to the Dean's list for outstanding achievement. I took up Taekwondo as a hobby and joined the International Students Club. By that time, Gene had assumed significant responsibility for my education and well-being, so he adopted me. He has taught me many things about humility, respect, discipline, and proper behavior, all of which I'm thankful for. After 1 year, I transferred to Yale College. Yale consisted of exceptional American and international students, many of whom were groomed and gifted, and several grew up playing music, or they could have gone to boarding schools, and most patients graduated at the top of their classes while being the captain of their debate, baseball, or lacrosse teams. In other words, the competition was daunting. But by this time, I had my eyes set on medical school, and in order to get there, I had to outperform, outshine, and outmaneuver my fellow students. But I still had a weakness: English. I studied day and night. I did intercollegiate martial arts competitions, and I did research in pharmacology. To cover the English and writing weakness, I swallowed my pride and enlisted the help of Jean and my roommate, Dr. Matthew Lawrence, to regularly review and critique my writings. I also attended tutorials to get extra lessons. Hunger was no longer a problem. All I had to do was to concentrate, stay focused, and brave the harsh winters of Connecticut. My hard work paid off, and I started Yale Medical School in 1998. Of 5,000 applicants, Yale accepted 125. These students were the cream of the crop, highly accomplished and intelligent. The curriculum was rigorous. The Latin nomenclature for body parts and diseases was overwhelming, but my professors were incredible, especially my anatomy professor, Dr. Stewart, who was always patient and attentive. Despite the arduousness of medical education and the long hours involved, I remained confident that I would succeed. The next 2 years of medical school were taught in the hospital in various disciplines such as cardiology, general surgery, and internal medicine. That is when I was drawn to neurosurgery. It's a hands-on specialty. It allows quick interventions to help patients and save lives. Truth be told, few doctors really fully understand the problems of the nervous system. I wanted that specialized knowledge. After graduating medical school, my next big challenge involved the 7-year-long neurosurgery residency. During the first 2 years of residency, I routinely worked in excess of 120 hours per week, and most of the times, I felt like a zombie. My job was to manage neurological problems with help in the daytime, but alone in the hospital at night. They threw me into an ocean of chaos, and my choice was to sink or swim. I had to take care of adults and children with brain tumors, seizures, strokes, birth defects, infections, and still attend to patients in the emergency room. Initially, I was confused. I felt like the world was spinning out of control, and I could not keep up. Despite being tired, sleepy, and hungry, I needed to read more and learn more fast. After all, real people's lives were at stake now. And to make bad matters worse, Yale had recently fired a neurosurgery resident for underperformance and incompetence. I truly feared for my career, but I persevered. My third year of residency, I became more confident and my responsibilities grew. I also gained more technical skills in the operating room. While in residency, Caitlin and I got married, and we exhausted what little savings we had to buy a condominium. Aside from her unwavering love and support, I am happy to have wed someone with whom I can enjoy saltfish and dumpling, and someone who appreciates Elimet and the GI's brass. In 2005, I crossed paths with a young aspiring business student from my village, Mr. Alexis Nisbet, along with his brilliant wife, Akila, both of whom were studying in Connecticut at that time. We regularly discussed politics, history, and current affairs, and I am proud to have them as my friends and as upstanding citizens of our community. My written records show that we were discussing the feasibility of an MRI in St. Kitts for at least 10 years before one was actually installed on the island. Unbelievable. That same year, we witnessed the collapse of King Sugar. We were heartbroken. We could not imagine Sugar City without the sugar. One may argue that aside from the falling prices of sugar, our small size could not compete with bigger countries such as Cuba and Brazil. Despite the tragedy, however, and despite our size, we diversified our economy. We rose to the occasion, and folks, we will rise. Towards the end of my residency, something unusual happened. The student became the teacher and surgeon when I operated on my anatomy professor, for he had a spinal cord tumor. He must have taught me well because he had a good recovery. When I graduated, I was recruited to work at Yale University, but I pleasantly declined. I moved to a private practice neurosurgery group in Texas instead. I'm a partner at a premier specialty hospital, and I've learned much about the medical business and medical business management. And now I am proud to have joined with the Honorable Prime Minister and Ministers Hamilton and Phipps and Team Unity to provide MRI imaging on the island. They have been open-minded and forward-thinking. They understood that we'd be better off getting the critical health services we need right here. Moreover, they understood, in light of the recent hurricanes, that we have a humanitarian responsibility to provide assistance to the surrounding islands. And guess what? Despite our size, they rose to the occasion, and we will rise. Now, some of you may say, well, Dr. Redmond, that's a decent speech. But at the end of the day, you'll go back to Texas and things will continue as usual. But I beg to differ, because each of us has a part to play here. And when we became independent, we decided to actively govern, protect, and serve our country. The people of Texas are very appreciative of my service, and my practice there allows me to use my profession, knowledge, and expertise as leverage to help our nation. My heart and family are in St. Kitts, and hundreds of patients have already benefited from the work of myself and my colleagues thus far. I intend to continue serving my country. Now, with regards to healthcare, let's work together to make St. Kitts and Nevis the provider of the best medical services in the region. Brothers and sisters, the time has come for us to compete not based on size, but based on our intellect, ingenuity, and creativity. So let's pool our resources together and let's move forward, because our time is now. Thank you very much.
Stay up to date with news, programs, and activities of the government with SKNIS. Like us on Facebook. Listen to us on SoundCloud. Follow us on Twitter. And watch our videos on YouTube. Connect with us today. SKNIS, St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service.